All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Dave Westcott, CEO of TransBlue, and I have with me today Todd Chapman, Vice President of Franchise Development for TransBlue Franchise Company. How are we doing today?
Good. Good morning.
Good, good. How's your abs doing?
What's that? I mean the Nuggets, the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, we're still doing great, man. Yeah, no, we're
The
doing well.
Nuggets are doing good.
Yeah, we're hanging in there. We're still alive. So for those who don't know, my Colorado Avalanche. We're based here in Seattle, and we've had the Seattle professional sports, I guess, arena as a whole has really dominated the Denver sports team. So the one thing I'm most thankful for, and I was, just in my prayer time this morning, like, Lord, thank you so much that Seattle doesn't have a NBA team right now. So we don't have to worry about coming across them at this point. From the Russell Wilson trade to the Avalanche getting ousted for the first playoff win, I think, for Seattle Kraken ever. Yeah, it's been, I've been asked about it a few times, I think, around the office, but it's all good. I'm still rooting for the Denver Nuggets. Let's hope they can take it down.
Hey, you know what? That's cool, man. That's what you got to do sometimes. You got to keep it
Fight
real.
through it.
You got to fight through that adversity. You got
Have
to.
grit as one of our values,
That's
right?
right. You got to have grit. You got to keep it cracking out there. Cracking. What's going on with the? What's going on with the Kraken? Did the
See
how are
what you
the
did.
Kraken
Just see
doing?
what you did there. Uh,
How are the Kraken doing? Are the Kraken up 2-1?
I think so. I kind of stopped watching once the Avs were out. To be honest, I've shifted gears
Yeah,
fully on
that's what happened to me when the Bruins were out.
yeah.
Because I'm a Bruins fan. When my bees failed to Florida, I said, okay, well, I guess I'm done with sports for the year unless the Chicago Bulls do something because I like the Bulls. But so,
Yeah.
anyways, I don't even know how they're doing because I haven't been watching. But excuse me, got a little bit of a cold going on here today, which is why I'm hatting it up. And so
You
right
showed some
before
grit though to be on this call.
that's right,
Appreciate you.
showing that grit, man, showing that grit, living them values, living the values for the team, right? That's how we like to roll. So
That's right.
today we got a fun topic. We're talking about our sales pipeline. And part of that sales pipeline is having a meeting, right? We got to have a weekly sales meeting. I don't know how many of you have a weekly sales meeting out there, but not only should you have your meeting with your leadership team and your operations teams and all of these things, and we don't want to have death by meeting by any means, but the meetings are so absolutely critical for accountability because without accountability, what we find is that salespeople tend to drift. And when they drift, when they don't have that laser focus, what happens? We don't have sales. We don't have the production that we need. So part of what we talk about is a sales meeting, and so in that sales meeting, there's just one real thing that we want to identify, and that's the scorecard. And those scorecard items are absolutely critical, I believe, to the success of the initiative. And so if we want a salesperson to close work, we have to engineer it backwards. We talked a lot last week about identifying that ideal customer, knowing who that customer is, going after and targeting that customer. We talked about engineering your entire sales plan in reverse. So today we're building off of that with the scorecard, and the scorecard is something you actually use with the franchisees too, right? Like when you're coaching franchisees in the field, you're big on what knowing your numbers and knowing your scorecard. And when you have those items, it really leads to success, doesn't it?
It does, and in fact, I was talking to a franchisee yesterday, and I just an open and honest conversation of hey, like where he wants to go in the business and the vision and the plan, right, and just talking about some of his personal goals, and it was great. It was a good, just straight shooting conversation, right, not beating around the bush. And one of it was like, hey, this is what I really want, and it's similar to what you do on the sales side, is build that plan, reverse engineer, right, just like the pipeline in sales, and sort of building out that strategy. And one of the things I was just open with him is I said, hey, for you to get there and really scale it up even more in this business, and honest feedback from myself is, hey, you need to really focus on your numbers, right? And knowing where you are, and it's like going to the doctor, and then what's the first thing you do when you go to the doctor, right? They take your blood pressure. They start to measure your height and weight. Kind of getting those. And it's similarly, what it does is the numbers and that scorecard and tell a story, right? And I know, just sharing a story with the Denver Nuggets, right? Their head coach Mike Malone. It's interesting. I was watching it after the game. We lost the other night. And he gets in the press conference, and he does this a lot of the times. He gets up and he looks at the box score, the scorecard, essentially, for the game, right? And he's looking at the rebounds, and he's looking at the assists, and he's looking at all the statistics, right? The percentages. And to him, he doesn't have to go individual or really look at the film, right? I mean, he will do that. But for him, initially, it's just he just lives and dies by that scorecard and that what they call the box score. And he's just saying, yeah, we got to be better at defense. I mean, look at the field goal percentages that we gave up. Look at the, blah, blah, blah. And it's just so I think the stats tell the story. Now we can dive in. And I think in these meetings, when you're having that regular, meeting, whether it's with the franchisee or with your salesperson, I think it's the scorecard initially kind of tells you, the successes and the red flags. Right. And then it helps you, I think, as the business owner or the leader, to dive in and start asking a little more questions. It's just that key indicator, like a doctor or a head coach, that it's just those leading indicators right away, right? Of, hey, this is where we are, this is where we're living. And then you can go deeper in that trends, right? And looking week over week, month over month, how are we tracking? And just like in sports, what's the scoreboard say? And it's a good indicator, or what's your standings, right? And I think the same way of business.
It also helps to set the expectation, doesn't it? Because if you're tracking rebounds and field goals and all sorts of stuff, like if we know that we need to be blocking shots, or if we know that we need to be bringing estimates to the table, we know that if we don't hit those benchmarks, if we don't hit those KPIs, if we don't hit those numbers, we fall short. We know that we're not in the right space, right?
Right.
And it also gives us an opportunity to course correct really, really quickly. Because one of the things that happens with a salesperson is, you can have a salesperson not sell, and you're starting to, oh man, my system's not working. Oh man, I need to change this. Oh man, I need to change this. And a lot of times when you're not scorecarding, these things are happening so late that it's too late to even course correct for the year.
That's right.
And our years are really determined, depending on what kind of business you're in. Like if you're in retail, your year is really determined by what? Thanksgiving weekend, right? Black Friday.
Yep.
You've got that month
Christmas.
to turn it around and have that positive initiative. If you're in, construction, you've got really that month of May is really huge. If you're in snow, that month of August is really, huge. Everybody has peak seasons. And so you have to understand those peak seasons. Working with FedEx, we know that peak season starts like November 1st. They're going to have a whole bunch of temp employees. They're going to have a whole bunch of drivers and trucks on the streets that they normally have. So you got to understand those particular items. And when you have that scorecard and you can set that expectation, what happens is if you see the trend immediately not hitting the target, then what happens? It's kind of disappointing, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, that's disappointing, but here's what we can do to correct it. And if we can make the corrections in week 1, in week 2, in week 3, we can course correct. And it only has to be small course corrections. Typically what we find when you make those course corrections early enough in the sales process, you're making changes to get your sales team back on stride, back in business. And you really have to manage that. And so that scorecard is absolutely critical. Now, I was in a sales seminar just for fun. I was taking a sales seminar because I'm always trying to level up. And one of the things that I was really, looking forward to this sales seminar, and this prominent sales figure, if I said his name, everybody would know it. They'd be like, oh man, that's amazing. And what I was really disappointed in was all this hype, and then not a lot of guts, not a lot of meat, not a lot of details. And I was thinking to myself, man, that's kind of a bummer. So I was thinking about on this podcast, on the entrepreneurial journey, building $1 million business, why do we join in? We join in for the meat. We join in for those little nuggets, those little tips. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break it down in all transparency. And I'm just going to share with you how we build our scorecard and what our scorecard looks like. And because I think that's what really helps. And so it's got to start with our annual revenue, or the revenue that we want the salesperson to produce. And so if we start with that annual revenue, and we talked about this last week, we need to understand the close rate. And remember, the close rate always starts at zero. The salesperson doesn't get to come in and have a sales rate. They start at zero. And how do we get our sales rate? We divide the number of estimates by the number of wins, and that'll tell us how many jobs we have. Therefore, if we went on 3 estimates and we closed 1 job, we know that we have a 30% close rate. And then we need the average job size, and that's only going to happen based on what they sell. And so we're going to, on job 1, if the first job is $1 million job, it's $1 million average. If they sell 10 jobs and they're worth 100,000 a piece, then we know what the average job size is. So we're going to start getting that data. That's what we're going to use. And we're going to use historicals to set our goals. So like historical data might say 30% is what we want to be. But Todd sees that fluctuate all over the board when he's coaching franchisees, right, Todd?
Yeah. Yep.
And when you see that fluctuate across the board, that also gives you opportunity to coach. When you see a low close rate, what do you know? What do you immediately go to when you see a low close rate?
Well, there's 2 main factors for us that we look at, when it comes to a low close rate. One is the responsiveness in turning around the bid. What's that turnaround time? How quickly are they getting the estimate into the hands of the customer? We live in a world today where people want things quickly, right? I mean, we can order things today to be there at the house from Amazon, for example, right? So I think we're conditioned as a society right now that, hey, we want things quickly, So in our world, obviously, depending on the, your customer type, your sales cycle, it may be different, and depending on what type of business. But in our business, when you're dealing with a residential client, they expect it to be quickly. So the first thing would be, are they turning around that bid within 24 hours, right? Are we getting that bid in the hands of the customer quickly? And then second is follow-ups, right? How often are they following up with the client? Those are the 2 key indicators for us. I would dive into right away to see what's
right away.
Those are the 2 biggest ones. Now there's others, right? I mean, like you said, there's little course corrections, right? And these are the things that once the scorecard is showing that close rate and we're meeting regularly with our salespeople, hopefully we have a good pulse on what's happening. We can dive into, hey, have you been out recently and evaluated, and just shadow that person to see, one of our best practices here in TransBlue is, monthly to go out with the sales team at least once, to shadow and evaluate to see where they are. But those are the 2 biggest ones right now, because as you know, I mean, the statistics show that the closes are between the 5th and 12th touch, right? Or follow up with the customer. I know somewhere landing in that range, some might take 20, you get some that might close within 2, but overall that average falls. I think it's 80% of sales happen after the 5th touch.
Right. And that's true. We even had a conversation with a guy doing some sales last Friday who says he does 2 touches and then stops. And so, you look at those things, and those are key metrics. So those metrics allow us to dive in and solve problems is super fast. But let's just say that our annual sales goal was $12 million. And if our average, if our goal was to close $12 million in revenue, and our average job size was $75,000 and our close rate was 30%, we now have the foundational data to be able to break it out by week. And so what we would know is that we would need 3 sales per week. That's what we know. We need to close 3 new jobs per week. And that sounds pretty simple. And then, so how did we get there? Well, we knew that we needed to do 9 estimates every single week. And because we know if we close at 30%, we need to see 9 customers. And so now that tells us exactly where we need to be. And then we know that we need to do, to Todd's point, 18 new follow-ups every single week. And we need to keep those going on for a period of 12 weeks. And so we're going to follow up 18 times, then we're going to follow up 36, then, it's going to continue to aggregate. So we know that. And then one of the other things we know is that if we're sending cold emails do better than cold calls. So we know that cold emails have a 10% connection rate. So we know that we then need to see 90 emails per week, because that is going to get us in front of 9 customers. And we know that if we're just doing cold calls, we need to be at 450 calls per week, because we're going to have a 2% connection rate with a 30% close rate. And so we can literally use these numbers. We can use these numbers based on our historical data. And of course, it changes. If your salesperson only closes at 22% or 18% or 50%, you can now manipulate the data and you can change so much of this information. But what this also does is this, so many people, I hear them say, how do I figure out my budget for sales? Some people say it's 10%. Some people say it's 2%. Some people say it's 5% of gross income. Well, this actually tells you what it is because you start to understand the cost of acquisition. And we talked about that last week, so we're not going to beat a dead horse. But once we understand that cost of acquisition, we now understand what our marketing spend is going to be for the year. And so those are some of the metrics that we're going over. Now, Todd, you work with many franchisees. You've worked with many franchisees for 13, 14 years. How often do you see them dialing into their scorecard? Or would you say that for a small business owner, this is an area of challenge, or would you say if this is an area of excellence?
Yeah, I would say overall, in my experience, it's an area of challenge. Now, I think based on who the person is, naturally some like just data, kind of make it that way. Others go off of feel and gut, but I'd say overall, this is, it's often, and I think it's Stephen Covey's quadrants. I think you and I have even talked about that in the past on this, on the entrepreneurial journey. I think what's easy as a small business owner is, they're passionate about what they do and maybe have started their business, obviously, with a passion there, but it's easy once the operations get going, they kind of dive into the weeds, right? And they can put out fires, and the strategy and and I would just put this as part of the strategy as well as numbers and those KPIs that are helping drive the business falls to the wayside, and they feel like I don't have the time for it. We don't want to make the time. It's usually one of the first things to go. But at the end of the day, it's the pulse. And you read any book, you need articles on Forbes or Harvard Business Review and some of these leading business publications. They all talk about what is some of the successful traits of a successful business owner. And one of them is always know your numbers and financials. And this just it rolls right into the financial numbers and the financial side of things. So I would say it's a challenge, an area of challenge for most business owners. I don't think it's a natural thing, and just that rhythm. But once they find it, once they are organized and they have that cadence and that rhythm, I think most start enjoying the business more. They start enjoying, obviously, these because it gives them the information that they really need. It's just developing it and that habit and with themselves, and then that culture with their team.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think is, you've been around thousands of business owners. What do you think? What do you think is the number one sales trait, number one, thing that they exhibit that really just brings light to, the guys who operate at the highest level when it comes to sales and just really driving those numbers? What comes to your mind?
That's a great question. I think it's a drive and a competitiveness to attain the goal. I guess if I could say it. I think there's a trait I see in most common thread. It's that competitive nature of meeting the goal. Once they know that, hey, whether it's 90 emails a week, it's 450 calls, there's just a drive, to get to that goal, and nothing's going to stop them. Right. I think that's one of the biggest traits. You can dive into some other traits. People talk about confidence, people talk about maybe some charisma, but I think it's attainment. I think it's the drive to attain the goal, and then they're going to do whatever it takes to get there. That's the most successful salespeople that I've been around.
The drive is really important, right? The drive. I believe that is super key. And, as a somebody who believes in sales, sales is what drives the world. Sales is everything that happens every single day. In every single no industry, no business survives without sales, no matter what anybody thinks. It's the heart and the soul. It's everything that drives. But when does the sale start? The sale starts the minute you open your mouth. That starts the minute you start talking, right? That's like, that's a fundamental key. And for me, what shows and what makes the best salespeople is, one, those who come off as an expert, right? So, if you can come off as an expert, and if you can show care and compassion that you want the best for the customer, because we're all attracted to passion, right? And show me that you want the best for me. Show me that you're looking out for me. Show me that you're looking out for my best interest. These are the things that are really going to drive the salesperson, in my mind, right? That want, that desire, that want. And a lot of it, Todd's an expert at these personality assessments. And so, like, he can look at those personality assessments and say, my A trait, my B trait, my C trait, my D trait. And part of that comes down to details. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of your salespeople aren't amazing at details, right? I mean, wouldn't you say that's one of the lagging areas with salespeople?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and obviously in the one we use, I mean, in the assessment we use, shout out to Culture Index, but one of the things they use with their sales profiles is you see what they would call people focused, that competitive drive, the A trait and the B trait, and then a lagging D trait. And a lot of times that low detail, because your most successful salespeople in the hunter mentality is they handle rejection. They are people focused, but at the same time, they got to turn around and say, hey, if there's a no, if there's rejection, they got to have quick memories, right? And just in short term, where it's just like, cool, I'm on to the next thing because of the drive and competitive nature, but also they kind of have this forgetfulness in some ways of just like, it's moving on. Like, I'm not worried about yesterday or even what just happened 5 minutes ago. And I'm just going on. They might've been on a cold call or, gotten an email saying, man, we're going to someone else, or, sorry, it's not right fit, whatever it is. And they need to move on quickly. Well, with that is usually a lot of times they aren't detail oriented. It's kind of that same similar traits, what I've found and what I've seen, but I also think with that is, personality is one thing, but what are the disciplines? What are the habits? I mean, I'll give, just working with you and alongside you. I mean, I think one of the things that makes you most successful, one, is work ethic. I think, that's not necessarily it's a trainable thing, but it's, the work ethic. You're going to work hard. And I think in sales, like anything else, your activity is going to lead to the results, right? Whether it's emails, cold calls, beating the streets, meeting with people, networking, that's, you can't, that's not necessarily teachable, but it's also, I think, the disciplines and habits you can form professionally, right? So, are we allowing technology to help us with some of these follow-up emails? And are we, what are some of the ways that, we're adopting those? So even though I may not be detail oriented, can I develop some of these disciplines and habits?
Yeah, I agree 100%, and to kind of tie this back to, to the scorecard, is that one of the things that we see is that these amazing salespeople have that lack of attention to detail. So getting in here and filling out their scorecard is going to be something they don't want to do. It's going to be something that they put off. It's going to be something that they're not exactly accurate with. And that's something you have to train. And that's something where discipline really comes in. And that's why that meeting becomes so important, because the salesperson, to your point, they have a short memory. They want to go kill, kill, kill. They're hyped up over the wins. And, somebody told me one time, and it's not the first time I'd heard it, but they said, man, you get as excited over a little win as a big win. And sometimes you'll just sell something to sell it. And because it's that thrill, right? It's that hunt of the chase. And so what the sales meeting does is it keeps our salespeople honest. It keeps them focused, and it keeps them from getting scattered. Because one of the things we know about salespeople is they want to hunt, they want to kill, they want to bring those sales in. And what happens is when they're not selling, when they're not closing, they'll start to look at the shiny apples, and they'll start to go down different paths and start closing different types of work. And you can see it in lots of places. It's like, hey, if we're focusing on exterior construction, but all of a sudden we want to go hunt and kill remodels. Well, now we're setting our operations team up to do something they don't necessarily do on a daily basis. And so, we might need to be very careful about how we pivot into those different markets, because they have different requirements, different types of customers are going to require different levels of pickiness or, execution. And so we want to be careful with our sales team. But what happens is, what I find is that when an owner isn't managing the scorecard, when they don't know how many sales need to come in every single week, when they don't know how many estimates need to come in every single week, when they don't know how many follow-ups need to come in, when they don't know how many client touches need to happen, when they don't know how much it's going to cost for advertising, when the owner doesn't know these numbers and they're trying to manage a sales team, what happens is the sales team just falls apart. And what happens is they get scattered and they start to blame the salesperson. Salesperson can't close. Salesperson can't do that. Worst salesperson I've ever had. I can't. And all of a sudden, now they've lost critical months in the year where they needed to be selling. And it was because of attention to detail. It was because of not holding a meeting. It was because of not managing a scorecard. And if we go into the battle and we know the expectation, right? If we know that the salesperson is going to have low attention to detail, then we know that if we hold them accountable on a weekly basis, they're going to be what? More detailed. They're going to be more organized. But if we don't enforce that, what's going to happen?
They're going to create their own narrative and create their, they're going to go their own path, right?
Right. And that can take your business in a whole nother direction. And then you may get sales in an area that you're excited to get the sales, but maybe you're not as comfortable in performing or executing that work. And now maybe you've extended your business into an area that you're not an expert in. You're no longer an SME. You're no longer a subject matter expert in that area. And when that happens, now you're working in a realm that can be dangerous to your business. So you got to be very careful about how you strategically approach your clients. And I would say, and something that you mentioned all the time, Todd, is you're always talking about the purple cow guy. I can't ever remember his name.
Oh, man, I haven't mentioned him in a while. Seth Godin,
right? That's your guy, like the purple cow. But what are you saying there? You're saying like, it's the 1%, but but 99% don't matter. Just know your 1%. Just know your one ideal customer. I mean, you share that better than I do, but I think that's such a key point.
Well, yeah. And I think, his is like more marketing, like, hey, be the purple cow for your customer, right? I mean, if you look out at a field, the whole idea is, right, the visual and the illustration is you can look out in a field and you see the purple cow, you're going to realize like, hey, you're going to just be drawn to that right away, right? And his background is more in the marketing, but I think in the same point, and I think you referred to this last week with Dave Vetter is that target customer and that target market. I think it's easy because if you have a hunter mentality salesperson and someone who just wants to go out and kill, they will create something and they'll go find something to kill. It might be a purple cow, it might be pink squirrel, but whatever that target customer is for you, I think knowing that if you're not focused on this and the cadence and the rhythm, and weeks go by quick. That's one thing I realized too, just talking to these franchisees, it's how fast time goes. And I think, for us to have kids and you see them grow up, it's the same thing. I mean, my wife and I were just talking about that, just, man, how quickly the kids go and another school year is done. And in the same way, I think business moves fast and weeks go by quick, right? So, these meetings, if you miss a meeting or two, that could be very significant, like in a month, like in our world of May being such a critical month in construction. I mean, if you miss on that. So, but if you create that discipline and you have a good pulse, it helps you to make good business decisions as an owner, right? I think you're not surprised. You're not waking up one day and getting blindsided. If you have a current pulse so you can autocorrect. Going back to the kind of where we started the conversation with basketball coaching and metrics. I remember, I played college basketball, and I was even sharing this earlier with one of our colleagues about the disciplines our college coach had. Practiced at 5 a.m. He said, if you weren't on the court by 4:50, you were late, so just the disciplines he created in us. But even as a team, like, not all the guys enjoyed that. And, obviously there was part of that, but we focused on 3 things during the game. They were field goal percentage, turnovers, and rebounds. And he did a whole background on statistics showing the history of our conference of the percentage of games. If you won 2 out of the 3, you won over 70% of your games. And if you won 3 out of 3, it was like 85% of the games, or almost 90%. So literally we come in at halftime and you talk about the course correction. Let's just call this the meeting, right? The sales meeting, because it's still in the middle of the game. We're still going. We still got a chance to correct it in the second half. So we come in and he would just write field goal percentage on the whiteboard, turnovers and rebounds, and put our score in a T-chart and their score. And then he would circle whoever's winning. And that was all he focused on. So it's kind of that target customer, if you will, that target that we're focused on. And we knew if we were winning the battle, if we were losing, and we could do some little corrections. It was just that little pulse. I mean, yeah, in it, there was a lot of, we can go into the details. Yeah, we had plays and we had specific systems and, we did all that. But at the end of the day, we made it very simplified. of what we needed to win, because he knew the percentages and knew the numbers, right, of what needed to be accomplished. And I think it's the same way in business and the same way in sales. As we're having that meeting, we can focus on it and autocorrect. Hey, if we blew it out, we had 4 sales this week, and we need 3. Great, we won. And overall, I think it's just giving that pulse, which ties back to where you are for the annual year, right, and how you're tracking. And I think it's just so much more easier if you're keeping that rhythm and that discipline of the weekly versus all of a sudden you're scrambling at the end of the quarter or the end of the months, and you're just trying to get all the data, which is a lot more work. It's a lot more time for everyone. And at the end of the day, you may be setting your business up for failure or success, because you just don't really know. You're relying on kind of a feel and overall.
That's a great story. I think that's powerful. And we've done things similar, right, where we take somebody who doesn't have the right CI culture index profile, who shouldn't be a salesperson. We put them into a sales role, and we just give them key metrics to hit, right? We need you to see 6 customers a day. We need you to see the bid out in 24 hours, and we need you to follow up twice a week. And when we do that, and when we have that metrics lined in, we can actually predict mathematically what our close is going to be. And we can say that somebody who's never sold a job, never been a salesperson, never been in that role, not to say that person didn't work hard and do amazing, because don't want to take anything away from them, because they really did an amazing job. But in the multiple times that we've done this, what's happened is we've always hit the numbers, because it's all about the math. It's all about the plan. It's all about the strategy. And strategy has to lead, and it's led through, just exactly like you said, 70% of the time, if we win 2 of these metrics, we're going to win the game. If we hit 3 of these metrics, we're going to win 90% of the games. It doesn't mean we're going to win all the games, but what it means is that we're going to have a high chance at winning the majority of the games. And so, that's what we're looking for. That's what we are focusing on here to build the greatest sales team that we possibly can, is knowing the numbers, knowing the KPIs, knowing the benchmarks, and then knowing what has to be hit in order to drive those results. And you mentioned it either, and it's a whole nother call in and of itself, leading and lagging indicators, and diving into, how those play into it. But for this, it's just really develop that scorecard. What are those key metrics, and what are you driving by? We've got a question from someone in our audience. And thank you for jumping in. What are some of the tools you use to recover from rejection or losing a sale you really hoped you'd get? This is a great question. I think Todd said it best. Have a short memory, right? We're going to hear no way more than we hear yes. The National Association of Sales says the average salesperson closes at 30%, right? So that means you're going to lose 2 out of every 3. So you're always going to lose way more than you're going to win. But the other thing, too, is celebrate the wins. Enjoy the wins. When you have a great win, have a great steak dinner. When you have a great win, enjoy it, relish it, and enjoy those times. Make a big deal out of it, even if it's ringing the bell in the office, ding, ding, ding. Just really focusing on. And then also always ask the customer, why did I lose? Did I lose because of price? Did I lose because of experience? Did I lose because I had the wrong pictures in my book? Sometimes you'll get great tips on how you can do better from your existing clients. And I think that's a huge way to really hone your skills. Your sales system is really asking, how that happens, right? And so focus there, focus on growing, focus on taking everything that you can to the next level. Any final thoughts, Todd?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it goes back to even the planning, right? Because if hey, you're at a 30% close rate, let's say you're at a 20% close rate, whatever it is. I think if you know that going in, it's just setting that expectation. You mentioned that earlier. It's hey, no big deal. I'm just closer to the no, to the yes if I hear the no, right? And so I think it's just understanding that. I love, we're keeping the basketball theme going, I guess, a little bit right now with the NBA playoffs. But, Michael Jordan, I love the quote, says he missed more shots than he made. I mean, his percentage was less than 50%, right? So I heard a quote just recently from a guy for the Milwaukee Bucks who's a former MVP and NBA champion, and a reporter asked him, it's kind of going viral, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, I might be butchering his last name, but he's a beast, and he said, and they lost in the playoffs and unexpectedly, and they were number 1 seed, high expectations like your Bruins, and he just said, hey, the reporter said, is this a failure? That you for the season a failure? And he shook his head, and he got back to him. He goes, man, there's no failure. We learn He goes, there's only one team, right, every year that's going to win this. He goes, we're going to lose, and we're going to, have that quote unquote failure a lot more than we are, winning it all. And so he goes, we just learn from it. And so I think, to your point, asking the customer why and learning from it, but moving on, I think is a great point, because, I go back to the national statistic of franchise sales, and you go to these conferences, and every year the average is right around 1% of everyone who looks at a franchise is going to actually purchase a franchise and obtain one. So that's 99 out of 100, at some point, whether it's you or them, are going to say no. So I think just knowing those statistics going in, it's not true salespeople kind of like, okay, it's no big deal, moving on. It may hurt initially, don't get me wrong. I think everyone has a little bit because you're working hard and it's going to hit a little bit, but cool, move on.
Yeah. I mean, and just remember, the sale's not always dead just because they said no. Right? Like, just because they said no, it's not always dead. And that was a great interview that he heard that you shared. And he asks in that interview, he says, did Michael Jordan, the 9 seasons where he didn't win an NBA championship, were those failures? And he says, you asked me the same question last year. And so that was I loved his response. I thought it was articulated very, very well. And I also, love, there's this, I saw that LeBron James had the most, Game 7 points. And then they showed Jordan. He's like, what is Game 7? So it all depends on where you're winning and how you do that. Obviously, I'm a Jordan fan over a LeBron fan every single day and twice on Sunday. But remember the game's not dead. Remember that it's not over. Even if the client comes back to you and says, hey, we've decided to get with another provider. My next question always is, have you signed the contract yet? And if they say no, it's like, well, here, let me, why did we lose? Was it price? Was it this? What can I make an adjustment? And then sometimes I'll even throw in a free bonus or a caveat. Well, if you haven't signed the contract yet, I can throw this in for free. And I would love to earn your business, and write a whole speech about how you care about their job. And you know what happens? I'll tell you what, 20, 30% of the time, you can get a customer to move off of no to yes. Just because they've said no isn't there. And then also follow up with the customer after about a couple of weeks. Ask them, how's the job going? I know you didn't choose us. I know you went with another provider. Just thought I'd follow up and see how everything is going. And sometimes you'll be able to step in and take over a job that somebody's failing at and get the same amount of money just because you were still following up. Just because you didn't get the work doesn't mean the opportunity's not there. So keep caring, keep pushing, keep going after it. Don't stop just because you got a little bit of rejection, right? Keep that customer there. It's about relationships, about closing, but it's about what's best for the customer. And if you're always looking out for the best needs of the customer, then it's going to allow you to take your business to the next level. This was a great call. If you enjoyed this time, if you liked this, please give it a like, give it a share on your social feeds. Follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook, David Westcott. Give me a follow, give me a like, hang out. Engage with us, ask questions. We're here to help. And same with Todd Chapman. Follow him on LinkedIn, Todd Chapman, the one and only NBA Final Four champion that he is. And did I just mix two leagues together?
You mix college and professional sports, man. I love it.
But you were a college basketball player.
That is true. That one is true.
Were you a D1 player?
I walked on at Division I, and then
walked on at D1. Look at, we got our own real life Rudy Rutabaga right here. This guy walked on to D1, Todd, aka Rudy. This guy's the real deal. If anybody can sell himself, he can. He's a rainmaker personality. Dude's bad to the bone. Give us a follow, give us a like, and it's all about Todd Chapman today. Walk-on champion of D1, NBA Finals, all that good stuff coming up very soon. Go Denver Nuggets, I guess.
You're ridiculous, but that's awesome. Love you.
We'll see you later. We're throwing up the peace sign like it's 1992. What's up? Peace. What's up?
Happy Mother's Day, everyone out there.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers.
Later on.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We'll see you. Bye-bye.